One of the challenges facing application developers today is to develop a user-friendly user interface. Among other things, a friendly user interface implies that data entry should be as simple and fast as possible. GeneXus provides configurable properties to simplify data entry and help design more attractive interfaces. One of them is the input type property. Its function is to replace what a user needs to enter in an attribute with a more user-friendly value. For example, consider an application for a travel agency, which has a transaction to enter the airports, and each of them has a country and a city. If we declare the transaction as it's defined, by default, the form will be this one, where we'll have to enter a code for the country and another code for the city. Entering data using a code is not the best experience for a user. Even though GeneXus automatically provides a form prompt where we can search by name, we could let the user enter the name of the desired country and/or city and have the program automatically search and assign the corresponding code. We achieve this by changing the value of the input type property of the attribute to the description's value, as long as the control type is edit. We'll do it with country ID by changing from values to descriptions, and it'll enable new properties. The one we must fill in is item descriptions. Since what we want is to enter the name instead of the key, in the item descriptions property, we select country name. At runtime, it seems that country ID has disappeared and only country name is left in edit mode. But actually, the attribute that shows those values is not country name, but country ID in disguise. If, for example, we want to select the country Brazil, we type it and internally a search is performed in the country table to retrieve the corresponding code, which in this case will be 1. But this will be transparent for the user. If we go to the web layout of the transaction, we see that the attribute we have is indeed country ID and not country name. It's important that the attribute we choose for the item descriptions property is a candidate key in the transaction to which it belongs. Otherwise, an ambiguity could arise. For example, let's suppose that in the airport transaction we have to assign an employee of the agency who's responsible for the coordination of flights. To do so, we enter the employee ID and employee name attributes of the employee transaction. If we change the input type property of employee ID to descriptions, and in item descriptions we place employee name to enter the employee's name instead of the key, we may get an ambiguity error. Since employee name is probably not a candidate key, there can be 2 employees with the same name. When it's run, we can see that the output shows a warning about the situation. If we enter a name, and there's more than one record with the same name, an error will be displayed because it will not know which one to keep. Therefore, it's always important to take this into account. Another consideration is that the attribute entered in item descriptions must be in the transaction where we use this property. Otherwise, an error will be thrown. And it must also be of char or varchar domain. We can configure this input type property and its associated item descriptions at the attribute level as we've just seen. If it's applied in this way, it will have this behavior in each transaction where the attribute appears, except in its own transaction, in this case, country. However, we can also configure these properties directly in the web layout of a transaction, and it would only apply to that form. In this case, we must take into account that the dynamism is lost, and that you'll have to manually change the name of the label and delete the description attribute that will no longer be necessary. We can also use this functionality in any panel or web panel we have. This behavior is similar to when we configure an attribute that's a foreign key with the dynamic combo box type. The difference here is that we cannot type the desired value, but we choose it among the displayed options. The disadvantage of having to type the descriptive name of a record we want to select is that we may not remember it exactly, or we may make a mistake when typing it. To help the user when entering values, next to the input type property set to descriptions, the suggest property is displayed. By default, it's set to no, but if we change it to incremental, the user will be offered matching values as he or she begins entering letters. Let's see it running. As we type letters, different options are suggested. As we saw with the input type property, suggest can be configured at the attribute level or at the field level. Once the property value has been changed, new properties are enabled. For example, filter operator to configure whether the records to be suggested should match from the beginning of the input or simply contain those letters. Also, if we want the filter to be case sensitive or not, or even to be able to set a limit of records to be suggested, by default, it's set to 5. The latter can help reduce loading times in case there are many records. Something else that this allows is to set conditions to the search. For example, if for some reason we only want to display the countries that begin with the letter S, we can enter the following condition. At runtime, if we enter any other letter, it will not suggest the matching records. Even if we enter the name of a country that exists in the database, it won't find it. That is, it neither suggests it, nor allows us to register it. Another property that appeared is instantiated attributes. Here, we have another way to limit the set of possible values that will be suggested for entry. It's used to filter a set of attributes based on other attributes that cannot be directly inferred. To clarify this, let's look at it in an example. Suppose we're developing an application for a company where we have one transaction to enter the products that are sold there, and another transaction to enter the suppliers of those products. In turn, for each supplier, we record the products that this supplier provides and the company sells. In addition, we have another transaction that will be used to enter claims about a certain product and supplier. Let's suppose that each product will have a unique name, and we're interested in searching for products by typing their name. So we configure the product ID attribute with input type in descriptions. And in item descriptions, we set product name. We leave the suggest property set to incremental so that it suggests the records. For this example, we're going to have 2 products for supplier A and 2 products for supplier B. We're going to enter a claim, so we select the supplier. When we type a product, it also suggests the products of supplier B. That is to say, it's showing all the products of the table product. We only want it to suggest the products from supplier A, which means that it should search the supplier product table only for the products that have supplier A. The property that we've just seen, instantiated attributes, is precisely for limiting the set of possible values displayed and/or entered, based on information that we've instantiated in the transaction. In order to display only the products of the chosen supplier, we must indicate the supplier ID attribute as instantiated in the mentioned property. The attributes indicated here are involved in determining the table to be navigated to suggest and accept the values entered by the user. In this case, when entering supplier ID to retrieve the product ID, the table navigated will be supplier product. At runtime, we can see that now it only brings the products of the chosen supplier. For the dynamic combo boxes, it's also possible to use the instantiated attributes property, as well as the conditions property. As we've seen, the use of the dynamic combo box is similar to when we set the input type in descriptions. One difference is that the edit controls allow typing values even different from the suggested ones, while the combo controls do not. Another difference is that in the edit controls, as we saw, you can specify a maximum number of values offered with the max items property. And in the dynamic combo, that's not possible. Therefore, if the number of records is very large, it will still load all of them, and that's an advantage of the edit controls. This is a summary of the use of the properties shown. To learn more, we recommend you explore our wiki.